Stop Murder and True Crime Podcast. I am your host, Gary Howard. Welcome to the Monday Murder Edition. I used to do this a while back ago, called it Monday Murder Meal, where I did three inmates. But I think I'm going to do it with just one and give more in depth, story behind them and what they did instead of doing a short three and giving too much information so I can't go back to do it because some of these individuals do have long, interesting stories that I would like to eventually cover. But if I do a short one, I don't know what's too much or not enough. But so I decided just to do this. I had one lined up that I was going to do, but because of this individual is going to be executed this Tuesday on May 17th, I thought, what's a better way to start this back up with doing one that's about to be executed soon in Georgia. And by the way, this is a trigger warning. This does have this story does involve the murder, rape, and abuse of a young child. So if this is something you might not want to listen to, totally understand. You might want to wait until next week. I'm gonna try to put these out every Monday, like I did before. I already got the next one up, and the next one I do believe, if I remember right, has no children getting harmed or nor animals. So, but there's no animals being involved in this one either. But I'm at home right now, about to be on the road again. I'm here with my cats watching me. They're my audience. But yeah, so let's talk about who today's individual. We're talking about Virgil. There's no truck stops on this. The truck stops is going to be for my full length truck stop murder episodes. But this is just going to be just the individual, the storyline, and what they ate. Usually it'll be last words, but since this person is not executed yet, there's no last words. Just he already scheduled his last meal. We're talking about Delano Presnell Jr. Condemned murderer Virgil Delano Presnell Jr. is scheduled for execution by lethal injection at 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 17th, at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia. Presnell Jr. was sentenced to death in 1976 for the kidnapping and murder of an 8-year-old girl and the kidnapping and rape of a 10-year-old girl. Now, I did have her name, but I'm not gonna put it out. The 10-year-old girl because it's irrelevant to what, and plus she's still alive and about, and I don't want anybody looking her up or anything like that. She's been through it. Once you hear the story, you realize she's been through enough already. So no reason to any more proper publicity to her. So there have been 70. So let's talk about Georgia's death row. There has been 75 men and one woman executed in Georgia since the U.S. Supreme Court reinstated the death penalty in 1976. If executed, Presnell Jr. will be the 54th inmate put to death by lethal injection. There are presently 37 men and one woman under death sentence in Georgia. I already said that. Still there. No, I didn't. There's 37 men on death row and one woman waiting to be executed. And if you want to, like I said, it's going to be this Tuesday unless something happens, his appeals or the governor, whatever may happen, why he got a stay of execution or delay of it. If you do live in the Georgia area and you want to go put up some signs, fuck you, dickhead, or whatever, the Georgia Dynastic Classification Prison is located 45 miles south of Atlanta off Interstate 75. From Atlanta, take the exit 201, turn left over the bridge, and go approximately a quarter mile. The entrance to the prison is on the left. Media covering execution will be allowed in the prison. Media staging area beginning at 5 p.m. on Tuesday. So you will see the buildup of people come. They'll be there, and once you hear what this individual did, you'll understand why there's going to be a lot of people making sure this guy's dead. So first, on April 23rd, 1976, Presnell attempted to abduct a 10-year-old girl in Clayton County as she was walking home from school on a wooded trail. Although he grabbed her and threatened her with a knife, the girl managed to break free and escape. So with that, he got scared, and I guess he figured that the girl recognized, will turn him into the police and give him a description of him. So he fled up north. This happened south of Atlanta. So he fled north of Atlanta to Cobb County. So on May 3rd, 1976, Presnell staked out an elementary school in Cobb County and observed a 10-year-old girl walking home on a wooded trail. So he assumed that she would be doing the same thing. It was just a shortcut home from the school to her house. Probably cut off a lot of time. He then returned the following day and waited on the trail in his car. He had a rug and a jar of lubricant. When the 10-year-old girl was walking down the trail, with this time she was with her 8-year-old friend, Lori Ann Smith. Presnell abducted both girls. He taped their mouths shut and threatened to kill them if they did not cooperate. He also said he had a gun. They got to Presnell's blue Plymouth Duster. While Presnell was driving, he forced the older girl to orderly sodomize himself, while he and did some with his fingers. I'm not going to say that, but just say he was sexually assaulting her. Let's go with that. So they drove to a secluded area where Presnell walked the children into the woods. He carried the rug and jar of lubricant. He made both girls undress, where he raped the older girl on the rug, injuring her because of what he did, of course, because she's a 10-year-old girl. Presnell then said that he was going to take Lorianne back to the car where the older girl should wait for him. Of course, she was petrified and scared, didn't know where she was at. So there, of course, she waited right there. But on the way back to the car, Lori tried to escape and run away. But Presnell caught her and forced her face underneath, under the water in a creek, drowning her. Later, when her body was found, the medical examiner would testify that there was water, sand, and plant matter in her lungs, stomach, and that would have been taken several. It would have taken several minutes for her to die. She had bruises on her neck, bruise on the back of on her back, where Presnell apparently placed his knee there. He returned. He said basically later on he would admit that he just put her underneath the water as far as he can until she stopped struggling. So he left her there. He returned to the older girl and forced her to, he sexually assaulted her, basically. And the same thing that he made her do in the car. I'm not going to keep saying that. I'm going to use sexually assault. Then he locked her in the car trunk and began driving. But a tire went flat, so he dropped her off at another wooded area after forcing to sexually assault her again. Although Presnell told her he would return, the older girl heard the sound of a nearby gas station and walked there where they called the police. She later gave a police description of Presnell and his blue duster and stated that his tire was flat. Shortly therefore, after the police spotted Presnell change the tire in a blue duster at his apartment complex where he lived with his mom, not far away from where he dropped off the older girl. Presnell initially denied everything, but later admitted that he knew the location of the missing girl. It led the police to Lorianne's body. A search of Presnell's bedroom uncovered a handgun and child pornography depicting young girls. He was charged with 5 offenses: murder of Lorianne Smith, kidnapping of Lorianne Smith, rape of Jane Doe, aggravated sodomy of Jane Doe, and the kidnapping of Jane Doe with bodily injury. In court, the aggravated sodomy charges was not submitted to the jury, as the aggravated sodomy of Jane Doe was not alleged to have supplied the bodily injury element of her kidnapping, so the sodomy did not make any injuries on her. There's no visible signs of trauma. But attorneys of Presnell first said in court found that Presnell, when the court started, that he was born to a teenage mother who drank and smoked heavily throughout her pregnancy, suffering from fetal alcohol syndrome that damaged his brain and kept him from, this is what they stated, from ever developing into a functioning responsible adult. His lawyer would argue. Of course, with all the evidence against him, testimony from the 10-year-old girl, he was found guilty by a jury of three capital offenses: offense rape, kidnapping with bodily injury, and murder with malice aforethought. Under Georgia law, a jury may impose the death penalty if it finds that the offender committed a felony under at least one of the 12 aggravated circumstances. I would go over the list, but I think I might. But at the penalty phase, let's talk about, so under the 12 offenses that a person can be found, if these things are connected to murder while murder happens. Let's start with one: is the offense of murder, rape, armed robbery, or kidnapping was committed by a person with prior record of conviction for capital murder, capital felony. 2, The offense of murder, rape, armed robbery, and kidnapping was committed while the offender was engaged in the commission of another capital felony or aggravated battery, or the offense of murder was committed while the offender was engaged in the commission of burglary in any degree of, or arson in the first degree. 3. The offender, by his act of murder, armed robbery, or kidnapping, knowingly created a great risk of death to more than one person in a public place by means of a weapon or device which would normally be hazardous to the lives of more than one person. 4. The offender committed the offense of murder for himself or another for the purpose of receiving money or any other thing of material gain value. The mur- 5. The murder of a judicial officer, former judicial officer, district attorney, solicitor, SOLICITOR, general, former district attorney, solicitor, or solicitor general was committed during or because of the existence of his, well, any kind of government official. The offender caused, or number 6, the offender caused or directed another to commit murder or commit murder as an agent or employee of another person. 7. The offense of murder, rape, armed robbery, or kidnapping was outrageously or wantonly vile, horrible, or inhumane in that it involved torture, depravity of mind, or an aggravated battery to the victim. This is what he was going to be the one that got him. 8. The offense of murder was committed against any peace officer, correction employee, or firefighter while engaged in the performance of his official duties. 9. The offense of murder was committed by a person in or who has escaped from the lawful custody of a police officer or place of lawful commitment. 10. The murder was committed for the purpose of avoiding, interfering with, or preventing lawful arrest or custody in place of lawful confinement or himself or another. 11. The offense of murder, rape, and kidnapping was committed by a person previously convicted of rape, aggravated sodomy, aggravated child molestation, or aggravated sexual battery. And the last one, the murder was committed during the act of domestic treason. So, yeah, they could get you if a murder happens along with any of them offenses. They will murder you. They will not murder you. That's means for capital. Well, they call it in Texas capital murder. So if the defendant committed murder under any of these circumstances, it would be an aggravated circumstance, and the death penalty can be given for this person. So at the penalty phase of the trial, the jury was instructed that it would impose the death penalty. So they're going after it. Like I say, he was already found guilty of it all. 1. The rape, if the offense was committed while penitentiary, while he was engaged in the commission of a murder. 2. For kidnapping with bodily injury, if that offense was committed while he was engaged in the commission of rape. Or 3. The murder, if the offense was committed while he was engaged in the commission of kidnapping with bodily harm, aggravated sodomy. The jury found that all 3 offenses have committed during the commission of specified additional offenses and imposed 3 death sentences on them. So off the death row you go. But of course, the appeals happen, and the first thing they try to complain about that the court erred in was the court could not prove rape, which just really blew my mind. It was a 10-year-old, but they couldn't figure out if it was forcible or statutory rape. And I know I'm butchering that word, statutory rape. But yeah, the court below actually identified 2 problems with the rape conviction: a state law double jeopardy violation, as well as the ability of the jury to verdict discussed in the text. The only evidence of bodily injury to support the crime of kidnapping with bodily injury of the older child, the 10-year-old, is the bodily injury with the results from one of the rape of that child. Thus, the conviction of both kidnapping with bodily injury and forcible rape cannot be upheld. So they're trying to say they're charging him twice for the same offense. The court apparently believes that both convictions could not be upheld because of the failure of the jury to distinguish in both instances between forcible and statutory rape. Counsel for Presnell was moved for acquittal on the kidnapping count, arguing that aggravated sodomy did not constitute bodily injury for purpose of the kidnapping offense. The trial court was specific in the grounds for rejecting this motion. And the judge said, this is what his response. He said it was nonsense. He said, I will give you precise rulings so that you will have the advantage of your motion. I will hold specifically the act of aggravated sodomy committed upon her person, such as harm that aggravated that kidnapping and made it a higher crime. I hold that it is not required. The law does not require a physical bruising, injury, or battery, but that the act of sodomy itself is as vile and gross as anything can be on the act of a harm against a 10-year-old child. I don't have any problem with that. So he is leaving there. And nowhere in its opinion does the Georgia court state that this view of the lawsuit is incorrect. Let me repeat that again. I have to read that again because he pretty much told them to go fuck themselves. That what they're stating is nonsense. He said, I will give you a precise ruling so that you will have the advantage of your motion. I will hold specifically that the act of aggravated sodomy committed upon her person was such harm that aggravating the kidnapping and made it a higher crime. I hold that it does not require the law does not require a physical bruising, injury, or battery, but that the act of sodomy itself is a vile and as gross as anything can be as an act of harm against a 10-year-old child. And I don't have any problem with this. It's for you to go back to death row and fuck off. I added that little last part. But yep, and told them. But yeah, nowhere in the Georgia state says that he did anything wrong by saying that. In addition, of course, everybody says this when they're about to visit, death row. That violates the 8th and 14th Amendment, so the potential resentence to death for proceedings to follow remain court, excluding certain juries that agreed and disagreed with death sentences. Remember, only one of the 12 needed to be found, and the one they did find was offense of murder, rape, and robbery or kidnapping was outrageously and wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman in that involved torture, depravity of mind, or an aggravated battery of the victim. Now, I forgot to mention this earlier, but all this happened because he was already sent to death in 76. But in 99, this is when all these appeals, these things drug out. So in 99, that's when he got his retrial. So everything I'm about to say from this is all from the retrial in 99. So this is the seventh, the kidnapping, and that's what he got. The aggravating circumstance was the seventh one I told you. Lawyers representing the federal defense program, which represents Presnell, filed a lawsuit with emergency motion in Fulton County Superior Court. They said the setting of his execution date violates a written agreement. So now they're trying to prolong it. The execution agreement reached last April with the Office of State Attorney General Chris Carr, which temporarily puts executions on hold during the coronavirus pandemic and established conditions under which they could resume. The lawsuit says the agreement said that executions will resume until 6 months after three conditions were met: the, the expiration of the state COVID-19 judicial emergency, the resumption of normal resumption resumption I can't talk today of normal visitation at state prisons and availability of the COVID vaccine to all members of the public. The judicial emergency ended in June, but the prisoners are still using a modified visitation policy, and children 5 still can't access the vaccine. Of course, the spokesman for Carr declined to talk about this. So one example is they're talking about the agreement stated that the conditions were met. The state intended to seek execution for this person, Billy Rollerson, Raulerson, who was sentenced to death for the May 1993 killings of three people in South Georgia, and that his lawyers would be given at least 3 months' notice after the conditions were met. The lawsuit says that the Lawsuit says the Attorney General's office said it wouldn't seek the execution of anyone else on death row until at least 6 months after the conditions were met, the suit says. In April, the Attorney General's office informed his attorney that the state intended to schedule Rollerson's execution for May 17th. The lawsuit says after Rollerson's attorney reminded a state attorney that he had agreed not to schedule execution during his, listen to this, previously scheduled vacation. So I'm on vacation. I can't deal with this right now. So the state attorney, this is told Rollerson's execution would not be scheduled until August at the earliest. A few days later, on April 25th, the state attorney notified Presnell's lawyer that the state intended to seek an execution warrant for him. The lawsuit says the warrant was issued on April 27th. Contrary to the agreement, the attorney general gave Presnell's attorney just 2 days of notice that they intended to set his execution date. So they did not like this guy. I don't think anybody liked his ass, though, which is good. Of course, his lawyer stated that these actions constitute a clear breach of the agreement and will lead to imperil harm if not enjoined, by the court. I feel like as being in Georgia, I could see this big fat like George, with the southern accent. These conditions constitute a clear breach of agreement and will be led to imperil harm if not enjoined by the court. Yeah. So yeah, if the court doesn't delay the execution, the lawsuit says Presnell's lawyer won't have the time they were promised to prepare his clemency hearing, which is scheduled for Monday. And so let's see how it's going for him anyhow. So after getting notice of Presnell's execution date, his lawyers learned that his expert witness they plan to use for the clemency hearing was recently had emergency surgery for a cardiac illness. Other witnesses they planned to call for also had conflicts, so they could not participate anyhow. So the lawsuit asks that the state be prohibited for seeking an execution warrant for Presnell, prolong it. And so it gives his defense a little time to build up a defense. Of course, all his people gave up on him. Not gave up on him, they had conflicts and one got sick. And other people on death row who are subject to the agreement until 6 months after the conditions were met of the COVID-19. His lawyer states, should this court fail to intervene on an emergency basis to enjoin the state and attorney general from prematurely carrying out executions in violation of the agreement, the federal defender and his clients will suffer the most grave of irreparable harm. The mercy motion filed by his lawsuit, which will execution will continue. All that's nonsense. So, but yeah, he is going to get executed the 17th, this Tuesday. So a few side notes about this. He was charged with, prior to, earlier that month, he was charged with aggravating kidnapping of a 10-year-old girl in Clayton with that, where he was charged with that. Presnell was also the one girl we started off with. Yeah, he was charged with it, but I don't think they was really going to go after that since he already got the death penalty in Cobb County. Presnell also was arrested in Florida earlier that year and charged with sexual battery, the equivalent of rape under Florida law, on a juvenile girl in Ocala. The police said Presnell was allowed to plead guilty to contributing to the delinquency of a minor. I don't see how that's the same. A misdemeanor offense on February 2nd in the Circuit Court of Ocala, according to a spokesman from the state's attorney's office in Marion County. He was released after pleading guilty and because he has spent 8 days in jail. So 18 days in jail for the misdemeanor sexual offense of a minor, but that was dropped down to contributing delinquency of a minor. So like my last episode, if he would have been stopped right here, we would have, Lorianne would still be alive. So Presnell Jr. I'll request. Here you go. Here's where this asks. So last request for meal was, it's already in, ready to go. Chef is making it, getting prepared for Tuesday. Presnell's request was last meal was 4 hamburgers, 4 French fries, 4 orders of fries, 2 vanilla milkshakes, 4 sodas, 8-piece bucket of chicken, potato salad, and 2 pints of vanilla ice cream. So there you have it. Hopefully Tuesday everything goes well and they do give him, he's going to be death by lethal injection. And if you do want to visit Lori Ann Smith, she is buried. Of course, her birthday is September 26, 1967 was when she was born, and she was taken from us May 4th, 1976 at age 9. She was about to be 9. She is Lyle Cemetery in Litchfield, Kentucky. Her memorial ID is 204571116. So she is the daughter of Joyce and W. Scott Smith. And so there you go. Hopefully they execute this asshole come Tuesday. And like I said, I'm gonna start trying to do these things every Monday now. Try to go back to my Murder Monday instead of, like I said, three inmates. I'm just gonna do one and try to give a detail. I already got my next one. Like I said, I had another one planned to do this Monday, but because this happened, I saw that he was about to get executed in Georgia. I thought I'll do this. But as always, you please rate, review, share, with other people. You never know who might like some true crime podcast. Join my Facebook group, Truck Stop Murder and True Crime Podcast, Twitter at Truck Murder, and Instagram as the same, Truck Stop Murder and True Crime Podcast. And if you want to email me, truckstopmurder@gmail.com. And there you go. And my next episode will be the regular episode of Truck Stop Murder. Until then, as I always say, you can't fix stupid, but you can sure numb it with a 2x4. I'm out of here.